What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. My name is Scott, and today I am very excited to bring you this brand new series of Skyrim builds that we have dubbed Legacy Builds. Why Legacy Builds, you ask? Well, we have learned a lot about Skyrim over our many years of playing it and making builds, and we know you guys love role-playing, so we definitely want to double down on that focus. These Legacy Builds are going to be a series of builds with very well thought out influences and inspirations from both the real world and the Elder Scrolls universe that give you a very particular Skyrim playthrough. We want these builds to be characters that will give you an incredibly memorable experience, the ones you will always get super nostalgic about. The builds will all be using mostly the same mod list that enhances the statistical and role-playing aspects that is available in the description below. And for those vanilla players out there enjoying the game on console, well, we will be providing some vanilla options where we can to give you an experience as close as possible, but of course, we can't make any promises as sometimes the aesthetic or role-playing relies heavily on the mods. But without further ado, I welcome you to the first Skyrim Legacy build, the Warrior King. The Warrior King is a legendary hero of the Reachmen, a king without lands, a successor to Durkarak the Black Drake and the Red Eagle, the man who will one day take the blessings he was born with and retake the Reach for his people. For this build, I really wanted to capture the feeling of an ancient Celtic warrior, while also taking influences from Chulainn, the hero of Irish mythology, the handsome young man and gallant warrior who, when enraged, would enter a crazed battle frenzy referred to as a warp spasm. And since the Reachmen are heavily inspired by the Celtic people, what better way to combine these elements than in a Reachmen build? With ancient sword and shield in hand, both blessed with legendary enchantments through the teachings of the venerable Hagravens, the Warrior King, like a spirit of vengeance, blitzes through his enemies. He enters the battle with unmatched speed and power, surging through foes, crushing skulls and cutting flesh, all in the pursuit of freedom for the Reach. I could go on, but I think that the Warrior King is best explained through his backstory, the events that made the man he is today. The Warrior King was born in a village in the Druidark Mountains in the year 170 of the Fourth Era. He was named Brannock and was the son of a petty Reachman king. His father had spent his young life securing a foothold in the Western Reach with great success, but was recently beaten back into the mountains by the Breton forces of Evermore. The Forsworn uprising of year 174 gave his father a fleeting sense of hope for an independent kingdom of Reachmen. Talks of alliances were taking place and things were looking up. That is, until Ulfric Stormcloak blew down the gates of Markarth and slaughtered any who took a chance on freedom from oppression. The rest of his father's life would be spent in exile, in a small village, with only the loyalty of a small tribe, the remnants of his once impressive force. The yet-to-be warrior king Brannock was a headstrong child, always running everywhere and all the time, a boy with unlimited energy. Rock climbing, sparring, and hunting with his kinsmen were the activities that made up his days. On the day of his 14th birthday, he was presented with a gift, a family heirloom, an ancient sword passed down for generations, a sword of the Elysian Empire. Brannock's ancestor was said to have claimed it from an Elysian general during Empress Hestra's conquest of the Reach. Brannock adored the weapon. He trained with it every day, aspiring to be like the legendary Red Eagle or the great Reachman hero Durkarak the Black Drake. He would one day lead his people and claim the Reach in its entirety for his kinsmen. As a successor to a Reachman king, this may have been easier, but that was about to change. On a winter night in Brannock's 22nd year of life, a rival tribe of Reachmen launched an attack on their village. Over the years, Brannock's tribe numbers had dwindled, with once loyal warriors leaving to pursue more prosperous paths. With fewer numbers, the village was overrun. Brannock fought bravely, slaughtering many enemies, but they would still be overwhelmed. His father, the king, urged Brannock to escort his mother and siblings to safety, an order which he reluctantly followed. The next morning, his father's head would be paraded around the village ruins as his enemies enjoyed the sunrise. Brannock, along with his mother and two sisters, spent weeks navigating the mountains, making their way to relative safety in the Eastern Reach, the Nord-ruled lands. They set up camp inside a cave for fear of being mistaken for the local Forsworn. One day, when out hunting for his family, Brannock came across a raven that spoke riddles, mocking and calling for the warrior king to follow. Not one to let an insult go unpunished, Brannock chased the bird up the cliffside, through the juniper trees and into a small cave. He had finally cornered the raven, but then, in an arcane explosion and a terrifying screech, the raven revealed its true form as a hag raven. My name is Nievla, The twisted creature spoke in grotesque form, beckoning him to come closer. Brannock was cautious at first, but the Hagravens were sacred and wise spiritual leaders of the Reachmen. They had close ties with Hircine and the other Daedra, like Namira. Nievla foretold of Brannock's greatness, told him of how he would one day unite the Reach and achieve more than any Reachman had before him. She knew he possessed special blood that allowed for great powers. Nievla sheltered Brannock and his family, teaching Brannock how to empower his weapons and armor, how to turn the souls of his enemies into useful arcane enchantments. Brannock's sisters agreed to enter the tutelage of Nievla and they would pursue dark magics. Brannock used these many years to train and learn all he could, perfecting himself as a warrior, preparing himself to fulfill his full potential. He travels the land of Skyrim, hunting in Hircine's honor, defeating greater enemies, truly challenging himself. He temporarily allies himself with the Forsworn, but after a few years of hopeless fighting, he leaves them to seek his own way. This is where we would begin our playthrough as the Warrior King, picking the alternate start as a Forsworn native. Now, of course, if you are playing vanilla Skyrim, you will have to make up an alternative reason as to why he's captured and taken to Helgen, but as a Reachman that should be easy enough. When you begin the game, Brannock has been helping the Forsworn natives for a few years, while his sisters and mother have been with the care of the Hagraven Nievla. Brannock is seeking his own destiny, and that does not lie within this Forsworn camp. Today, he seeks out his own path, abandoning the Forsworn cell. So now that we know where he fits all into this, let's talk about the quests and role-playing that work so well for this character. The standout quests for this character are definitely anything to do with the Forsworn and the Daedra they worship. Chief among them is Hircine, and you should seek out his quest as soon as possible so that you may pick him as your patron deity. Of course, do as he says, killing Sinding the werewolf, showing off your combat prowess to your god. Other Daedric princes that you should do quests for include Mehrunes Dagon, Molag Bal, Namira, and Malakath. For the Reachmen, Molag Bal and Mehrunes Dagon are invoked so they can dominate and destroy their enemies. Malakath is a patron of all outcasts, as the Reachmen are, and Namira is revered for her connections to the dark and shadowy spirits, and the vile ceremonies such as the creation of the Briarhearts. So completing all of their quests without betraying them would be paramount for this character. Plus the artifacts, the Mace of Molag Bal and Mehrunes Razor could be used instead of the honed Elysian sword to mix it up, and they are definitely options for vanilla players. When you start the game with the Moonlight Tales, I would recommend giving yourself the Lycanthropy Curse with the Ancient Ring in your inventory, immediately rationalizing that he had been blessed by Hircine prior to the start point, or if you rather, you could join the Companions and become a werewolf that way. The Companions Guild is fitting as it is a culture all about proving yourself as the strongest and fittest warrior. However, it is a Nordic-dominated group, and the Reachmen are no big fans of the Nords, and also having to cure people of Hircine's blessing may not jive well with Brannock, but still the Companions can work for this character, but not a priority. Ultimately, the important part here is the lycanthropy, because it reflects the crazed battle frenzies of the Irish mythological hero Chulainn, which is a big inspiration for this build. Joining the Dawnguard is preferable to the vampires, if solely for the reason that he would not trade his lycanthropy for vampirism. Also, what's the point of ruling over the Reach when it's plagued with vampires? Of course, when you arrive at Markarth for the first time, the Forsworn Conspiracy is a mission you definitely want to pursue, and of course, you will be supporting the King of Rags, Madanach, in his escape from Sidna Mine. An additional relic that would be prized by the Warrior King is the sword Red Eagle's Bane, which can be obtained through pursuing the Legend of Red Eagle quest. Red Eagle's Bane is also another suitable weapon replacement for vanilla players. As far as the Civil War is concerned, I would recommend staying out of it. Both the Empire and the Stormcloaks are diametrically opposed to the Reachmen. Outside of particular quests, role-playing is going to involve a lot of anti-Nord sentiment, and Brannock's only interest is in the independent Reach. However, the realization that he is Dragonborn and has the power of the Thorm is going to confirm to him that the prophecy Nievla the Hagraven gave to him was in fact true, and he does possess special blood that he can one day use to claim the Reach for himself. Seeking out powers and abilities, as well as tough enemies to prove himself, are key motivations so that he can fulfill this prophecy. Many of the Forsworn may not regard him as such and attack him on sight, but be assured that one day Brannock will come to rule them all. He will achieve more than any Reachman ever has, more than even Durkarak the Black Drake, who took the Ruby Throne in the Second Era. But now let's put all of this into context with the gameplay functions. starting with race, standing stone, stats, and religion. Now, through the backstory and role-playing, you may have picked up quite a few of the details about this character, namely his race. The Warrior King is a Reachmen, and the Reachmen biologically most closely resemble the Bretons, or Manmer of High Rock. Now, while physically they are similar, the Bretons and Reachmen consider themselves distinct races, but for gameplay purposes, we will be playing a Breton to reflect these same physical attributes. Now, the Breton race with the Imperious Races mod has 3 standout features. First is the passive ability Spell Mantle, which gives you 15% magic resistance and 25% spell absorb when below 25% magicka. Secondly, you have the Grail of Bethany, which is a lost artifact that can be acquired during your playthrough, and when it's in your inventory, it gives you 50% magicka and stamina regeneration, and that stamina regeneration is going to be all too useful for the Warrior King. Finally, there is the Stones of Galen, which causes standing stones to provide an additional bonus effect, which brings me to the standing stone choice, which is the Steed Stone. The Steed Stone both increases stamina by 50 points and adds random landmarks nearby on the map. But more importantly, the Steed Stone increases sprint speed by 40% outside of combat and boosts stamina regeneration by 50%, which is perfect to represent the Warrior King's legendary physical feats like running cross-country and felling hordes of orcs. The Breton passive Stones of Galen also provides the extra gift of taking half damage from attacks while sprinting or riding a mount, which just fits perfectly with the playstyle of charging in shield raised and lunging at enemies, all the while taking barely any damage when combined with some of the perks we choose. Now, very importantly, and a new addition to the FudgeMuppet standard mod list, is the Wintersun Faiths of Skyrim mod, which adds religious worship into the mix, along with abilities that come from that worship. It also adds in another set of religious goals to abide by in order to increase your favor with your patron god. As we've talked about, the Reachmen worship a variety of Daedra, but chief among them is Hircine, the Lord of the Hunt. So it would be most appropriate to choose this deity when you can, and like I said before, prioritize doing the Met by Moonlight quest in Falkreath ASAP. You could also choose either Mehrunes Dagon, Molag Bal, Malakath, or Namira if you would rather those, but when you weigh up both the role-playing and the statistical benefit, I think Hircine is best. However, Malakath works pretty well, and potentially even Molag Bal, but regardless, my preference would be Hircine, and it works well in terms of religious goals, which are slay the living in open combat, especially those stronger than you, live as a werewolf, pray in the wild, those skilled in light armor are most deserving of my favor. Which is absolutely perfectly aligned to our character. Now, for this worship, you will receive an ability called Bitter Mercy, which doubles attack damage against living targets with a certain percentage of health or less, and that percentage is based on your current favor with Hircine. When you reach devotee status, you can perform Posting of the Hunt, which means during prayer, invoke a hunt against the living within 500 feet, revealing them and exposing them to Bitter Mercy. Blessings from Hircine's Shrine also regenerate 2% of your maximum stamina per second, which further increases the potential for the power attacking, sprinting, shield bashing playstyle, while also incentivizing a higher base stamina, which brings me to the next point we have to talk about, stats. For the stats spread of the Warrior King, I think 50-50 health and stamina works quite well. If you're feeling even riskier, you could try even going a higher split stamina for that virtually unlimited sprinting and power attacking, but I'd adjust according to difficulty. But remember, we will have lots of stamina regen, and with both using the Stones of Galen passive on top of light armor perks and the sprinting with shield raised, you are going to be very, very resistant to damage as long as you keep moving. As a vanilla Skyrim player, I would recommend going much higher with health, as you aren't really going to be reaping the same benefits of stamina without the modded perks and abilities. Now let's move on to gear as well as the shouts, spells, and abilities. The Warrior King is not a magic-focused character at all, and so won't be using any spells. Shouts are optional, but then again, they aren't really important for the feel of a Reachmen warrior. The main thing here is going to be the beast form. The werewolf form will be sought out as soon as you can get your hands on it, and I recommend using this rage form, like I mentioned earlier, similar to the Cuchulainn warp spasm. So perhaps use it when you are in great danger or some sort of emotional event happens for your character. Or if you choose this option with Moonlight Tales, have random transformations at the moon. But let's talk the aesthetic of this guy. We wanted him to look like a Celtic warrior, an Irish hero of old, but of course perfectly fit him into the Elder Scrolls universe, enough that he looks believably like a Reachmen. We think what turned out well is the Forsworn armor, boots and gauntlets, a silver ring and necklace, all of which are completely available in vanilla, and then for the headpiece, the Barbarian Hero Circlet. His weapon is the Honed Elysian Sword from the Bruma mod, but it's probably a good idea just to item code the weapon at the start of the game for the sake of role-playing. His shield is the Nordic Moonstone shield. Of course, you will want the Grail of Bethany in your inventory. As we mentioned previously, for vanilla players, a circlet can be used instead, and perhaps a Nordic sword and shield. So let's talk enchantments. The enchanting perk Miracle will be used on the silver ring, getting one-handed magic resistance and stamina regen. The silver necklace also will have one-handed and magic resistance. The reason we chose silver was just because it's the metal that the Reach is renowned for, so we thought it was fitting, but you could also use any of the silver varieties with gems in them. The Forsworn armor is enchanted with stamina boosts and stamina regen, the boots have one-handed and stamina regen, the gauntlets have one-handed and block, and the hero circlet can really be anything as none of the available enchantments really help our character, but I'd suggest water breathing as it fits into the legendary athletic prowess of the character. The Honed Elysian Sword is the family heirloom that was passed down, and it's enchanted with Absorb Health and Absorb Stamina, which will keep you going and going, but we'll talk about this all in context in the playstyle section. But before we move on to the playstyle and show you how everything works in context, we are going to talk about skills and the standout perks essential to the playstyle. We won't be talking about every single perk, but the full list will be on screen. The skills for the Warrior King are one-handed, speech, light armor, block, and enchanting. One-handed, block, and light armor factor in to represent his superior athleticism and fighting skills, speech is to represent his charisma and leadership skills, and enchanting is a skill taught to him by the ancient and venerable Hagravens, whom the Reachmen revere. From the one-handed perk tree, it's all pretty straightforward and damage related, but of course, sprinting is going to be an important part of the playstyle, so overrun is very crucial, allowing you to perform a sprinting power attack that deals up to 50% more damage and critical damage to a target above half health. The higher its remaining health percentage, the more damage and critical damage is dealt. The standout perks for block, of course, are the power bashing perks, but of course, both Block Runner and Unstoppable Force are absolute priorities. Block Runner allows you to block without penalty to movement, which represents the speed and strength of this build, and Unstoppable Force allows you to sprint with shield raised, plowing through enemies and knocking them to the ground. Light Armor has quite a few perks that work brilliantly with a bunch of powerful abilities this build already has. As a leaf means that while sprinting in Light Armor, you cannot be staggered and take 50% less damage from power attacks. And on top of this, Wild and Free gives you 50% less damage from attacks while sprinting while wearing Light Armor, and when you combine this with the Stones of Galen's Steedstone effect, which halves damage taken while sprinting, and on top of that, combine that with the Unstoppable Force block perk, you will become an absolute untouchable juggernaut while sprinting, so it's in your best interest to keep stamina high so you can constantly sprint. And there is also a bunch of awesome movement speed increasing perks like Tempting Fate and Survival Instinct as well. The main reason we have speech is to add another layer to the Warrior King, representing both his charisma as a future hero king of the Reach and his close connection with the primal forces of nature through Hircine. He is so charismatic that he can even command animals to his will via the Speak with Animals perk. The enchanting skill was picked to make him feel like a mythical hero wielding legendary enchanted weapons and armor, and it was the Hagravens that gave him this knowledge to imbue them with the arcane. It's pretty straightforward, but Miracle, allowing you to make a single item with 3 enchantments, is very valuable, as well as the twin enchantment perk. For vanilla players, the skills will remain the same, but of course you will miss out on a bunch of the modded perks like Speak with Animals, Miracle, and the incredible reductions to damage taken while sprinting. So speaking of all the sprinting, let's talk about the playstyle, because this is gonna involve a lot of it. Sprinting into battle is this guy's forte, whether using shield to charge and bash down foes to the ground, or whether he leaps in blade first, slicing skin from bone. This builds high stamina regeneration, as well as the aforementioned perks and powers that give this guy a nearly invulnerable state while sprinting, are going to incentivize you to keep moving and moving, bashing and power attacking, reflecting this character's unparalleled fitness. On top of this, a sword with both Absorb Health and Absorb Stamina are going to give you a constant flow of regeneration as long as you remain on the offensive. The case for this build truly is the best defense is a good offense. However, there are also a few things that you can throw into the mix, such as the Speak with Animals perk that allows you to have a wild animal companion to back you up in battle, which you should try to have at all times. All of the available options work well, but for this character in particular, I would definitely recommend prioritizing a saber-tooth companion, because with the gift of Kinnereth perk, they move 40% faster and are completely silent. This speed will match your sprinting and slashing playstyle perfectly, always on the move. The final variable here is the werewolf form, which for role-playing reasons I like to use at any moment the character would have high levels of stress or emotional pain, reflecting the warp spasms of Chulainn, but outside of that role-playing suggestion, you could really use it any time you like for that added advantage in battle. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the first in our series of the Legacy Skyrim builds, the Warrior King, the Reachmen who by the will of the gods who will one day fulfill the prophecy and take back his lands and beyond. Thank you so much for watching this video. As always, we really appreciate your guys' loving support. Thanks again. Let me know what you thought of the build down below, and don't be afraid to leave some suggestions for future builds in the description. My name is Scott from FudgeMuppet. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.